The moment my boss told me I was too pretty to be taken seriously, I felt the air freeze around me. That was Karen, the sales manager at the downtown branch where I worked. I still remember her words as if they were slashing through the calm of the office like a cold blade. It wasn't just careless banter, it was a verdict, a dismissal wrapped in a compliment, and it hit me harder than I expected. I sat there, clutching my sales report, watching the flicker of amusement on his face. Ryan, my boss. He was a man who wore his arrogance like a tailored suit, crisp and unyielding. At 32, I was already the top salesperson on the floor, beating every man in the room with numbers they couldn't argue with. Yet here I was, being told my looks were the reason I wasn't taken seriously. The office was buzzing around me, indifferent. I could hear the tap of keyboards, the low murmur of calls being made, but inside I was engulfed in a suffocating silence. How could he say that? How was my dedication, my late nights, my record-breaking months just reduced to my appearance? I wanted to lash out, to scream, but instead I smiled, a calm, deliberate smile, the kind that says, "You have no idea what's coming." My name is Emily Sinclair. I'm 31, a sales executive who's learned to survive in a world where prejudice often masquerades as praise. I've been this company's silent powerhouse for 3 years, known for turning cold calls into loyal clients and doubters into believers. Yet here was Ryan trying to clip my wings with a petty remark. But this wasn't just about the office. That morning before the meeting, I had spoken to my younger brother, Jake, who has always been my rock. He works in tech support, quiet but fiercely protective. When I shared what Ryan said, his voice was sharp. "They don't see you, Em, but you'll make them." That moment should have been empowering, but instead I felt trapped. It wasn't just Ryan, it was a pattern, a web woven by the people who should have been my allies. Later that day, I overheard a conversation by the break room. Maya, a colleague, was whispering with 2 others. "Ryan's got a new favorite," Maya said, nodding toward a younger woman who was just hired last week. "She's, well, easy on the eyes." Their laughter felt like knives. I knew what they meant. It was the same old story, look the part, but don't expect the part of the player. And then came the final straw. At the weekly sales meeting, Ryan stood in front of the whole team, announcing a reshuffle. I was moved from handling premium accounts to the small fry clients, a demotion thinly veiled as rebalancing workload. "Emily, we think it's better to give you a chance to develop new skills," he said with that smug grin. I forced a polite nod, but inside, fury boiled. This was blatant sabotage. Walking back to my desk, I caught my reflection in the glass, composed, poised, but burning with a silent vow. They underestimated me. They thought my looks were a weakness, a distraction. What they didn't realize was that I had a plan, and I wasn't done yet. So here I am, standing at the edge of a storm I'm about to unleash. How do you fight back when the very people you work with see you as less because of your appearance? How do you prove that being too pretty doesn't mean you're not powerful? That question is the one I'll answer, but first, let me tell you how it all began. If you think Ryan's comment was the worst of it, you haven't met the man behind the smile. Ryan had this habit, tapping his pen against his desk in a slow, deliberate rhythm whenever he thought he was about to win. Like a metronome counting down the inevitable. It became a symbol of his smugness, a warning that something unpleasant was coming. One afternoon, I caught him alone in his office, the door slightly ajar. I needed approval on a client contract, something urgent. But instead of a quick sign-off, I got a cold lecture. "Emily," he said, eyes flicking up from his screen with a smirk, "your numbers aren't bad, but maybe if you spent less time on your image and more on the product, you'd close bigger deals." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting I'm not working hard enough?" He chuckled, that slow, annoying tap beginning again. "No, just that people buy from people they trust, and some clients might find it hard to take you seriously." I clenched my jaw. "Are you saying you don't trust me?" "Not exactly," he replied smoothly. "I'm just trying to help." Help, the word tasted bitter. It wasn't the first time he'd thrown me under the bus. A few weeks prior, during a client pitch, I noticed one of my proposals quietly vanished from the presentation slides. Ryan had replaced it with another colleague's less effective plan. When I asked about it afterward, he waved me off, calling me overly sensitive. And then, the sneakiest move of all, Ryan started spreading rumors, subtle whispers to our team, suggesting I got ahead because of my looks or charm rather than skill. I heard it from Lisa, one of my closest coworkers. "You need to watch out, Em," Lisa said cautiously one lunch break, stirring her coffee. "Some people don't want you to succeed." Heard Ryan's been telling people you cozied up to the higher-ups. It's ridiculous. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. The poison was already seeping in. Lisa had been a lifeline from the start. She was sharp, sarcastic, and one of the few who saw through Ryan's facade. Don't let it get to you, she advised. You're stronger than they think. Even my brother Jake, ever the voice of reason, had noticed the pattern. You've got to stop letting him get under your skin, he told me one evening over dinner. Figure out his game and beat him at it. But how? Ryan's power was more than just office politics. It was backed by a quiet network. He had the ear of HR, the trust of senior management, and a way of twisting stories to make himself look like the victim. Every time I tried to raise concerns, doors subtly closed. One day, after an exhausting meeting, I bumped into Maya, the colleague from the break room gossip. She was unusually quiet. Maya, I said, lowering my voice, what's really going on? Why does it feel like the whole office is turning against me? She hesitated, then confessed, Ryan's been pressuring us to take sides. He says anyone who supports you is disruptive. I didn't want to get involved, but it's hard. That hit me harder than I expected. Not because Maya was weak, she was, but because it showed how isolated I'd become. And yet, I noticed something else. Among the sea of whispers and sideways glances, a few people quietly watched, waiting. Among them was Ethan, a quiet data analyst who barely spoke but always gave me a knowing nod when our paths crossed. Don't let him win, Ethan said once when I caught him lingering by the coffee machine. You've got more fight than he realizes. Ethan was a mystery, reserved, precise, but somehow reliable. I suspected he had access to information I didn't. Maybe he was the unexpected ally I needed. That night I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my reflection. The woman in the mirror was calm, but inside a fire was growing. Ryan had made one critical mistake, underestimating me. Lisa's words echoed in my head. Stronger than they think. But strength without a plan was useless. I promised myself I'd learn everything I could about Ryan's moves, his allies, and his weaknesses. It was time to stop being the office punching bag and start turning the tables. The question wasn't just how to survive anymore, it was how to outsmart him completely. Would Ryan's carefully built empire crumble? And if so, how soon? That was the question burning in my mind as I prepared for the fight ahead. A fight that wouldn't be won with anger or shouting, but with patience, strategy, and the quiet power of someone who refuses to be invisible. The moment I decided not to let Ryan break me, something inside shifted. It wasn't an overnight transformation, it was a slow, deliberate change like water carving stone over time. I realized I had to stop reacting and start acting. I needed a plan, a secret weapon, and above all, patience. That night I pulled out my laptop and began to sift through emails, sales records, performance reviews, anything that could give me an edge. Ethan, the quiet analyst, had mentioned things in passing, how sometimes the smallest discrepancies in numbers or unusual email chains could reveal hidden truths. I had no idea then how right he was. Weeks before Ryan's backhanded comments, I remembered a brief moment during a routine sales meeting. Ryan had dismissed a client lead I was excited about, saying, "That's not worth your time." I'd argued it was, but he insisted. I'd never known why until I started digging. That lead had gone to someone else, someone Ryan favored. Funny how he balances workloads, I muttered to myself, scrolling through the data. But the numbers don't lie. Lisa was still my closest ally, a firewall against the constant rumors. One afternoon, we sat in a quiet cafe just off the main street, away from prying ears. I don't understand how he gets away with this, I said, pushing my coffee aside. It's like he has a shadow army. Lisa nodded, stirring her tea thoughtfully. He does. He plays the game better than anyone here. And people follow the winners. I looked up, determination hardening my voice. Then I have to stop playing his game. I need to create my own. Lisa smiled, the kind of smile that hinted she believed I could pull it off. You're the smartest one here. If anyone can, it's you. I wanted to believe that, but there was something else, something I hadn't shared with Lisa yet. The night I found an encrypted folder on my work computer, a folder I never put there. Curious, I opened it carefully and discovered a collection of emails, spreadsheets, and even voice memos. Evidence. Solid proof of Ryan's manipulation, how he'd been diverting clients, fudging sales numbers, and even sabotaging others' deals. After watching this video, may your heart feel at ease and revenge be fun without exhaustion. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep our spirits bright together. My heart pounded. This was gold, but it was also dangerous. If Ryan found out I had this, it could be the end of me. That's when I realized I needed help. Someone on the inside, someone I could trust with this secret. I reached out to Ethan one evening. We met at a local bookstore, his suggestion, somewhere neutral, low-key. I handed him a USB drive with copies of the files. "Take a look," I said quietly. "I think this might be what we need to bring him down." Ethan studied the files meticulously, his brow furrowed. "This isn't just misconduct, it's a systematic cover-up." "Exactly," I said, "and I want to expose it. But I can't do it alone." Ethan nodded slowly. "I can help. I know how to trace these things back to their source, but we need to be careful. Ryan's got friends in high places." I swallowed hard but felt a surge of hope. For the first time, I wasn't alone. Meanwhile, the pressure at work wasn't easing. Ryan's constant digs, the whispers, the subtle exclusions, they all kept chipping away at my confidence. But I learned to mask it well. Smiling through gritted teeth became second nature. One afternoon, I had a tense exchange with Ryan in the elevator. He stepped in just as I was leaving a meeting, the silence thick. "You know," he said, leaning casually against the wall, "it's cute how you keep trying." I met his gaze evenly. Trying is how I get results. He laughed, a short, cold sound. "Keep dreaming, Emily. You'll never be more than a pretty face here." I smiled wider this time, my voice steady. "Maybe, but sometimes pretty faces make the biggest waves." He frowned, surprised by my calm. Then the elevator dinged and he stepped out, leaving me alone with my thoughts. That day after work, I sat on my balcony, staring at the city lights. The world outside seemed indifferent to my battles, but inside I was plotting a comeback that would shake this place to its core. I remembered a conversation with my mother months ago, over the phone. She had told me, "Emily, never let anyone tell you who you are. You define yourself by your actions." Those words fueled me. Then there was Jake, my brother, always steady and pragmatic. "Remember, Em," he said one night, "this isn't just about beating Ryan, it's about showing them all that you're unstoppable." It wasn't just personal anymore. It was about justice. I started documenting everything. Meetings where Ryan undermined me, emails where deals mysteriously shifted, times my ideas were dismissed only to be stolen by others. Each piece added to the growing mosaic of proof. Lisa became my sounding board, the one who reminded me to breathe when the fight felt overwhelming. "You've got this," she told me one evening. "Remember, it's not just about revenge. It's about reclaiming your power." The plan was taking shape, a careful, intellectual strike. No shouting matches, no rash moves, just facts, evidence, and the slow dismantling of a man who thought he could silence me. But even as I prepared, I kept asking myself, what would happen when Ryan found out? Would he retaliate? Could I handle the fallout? I also had to think about the others, my colleagues who had been caught in his web. Maya, who'd been hesitant but honest. Lisa, who risked her reputation to stand by me. Ethan, whose quiet strength had become invaluable. Their support meant everything. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore, I was fighting for all of us. One late night, as I was reviewing the files Ethan had helped decrypt, a new message popped up on my screen. It was from an unknown sender. "Be careful. They watch closely." I froze, the warning was clear, but instead of fear, I felt resolve. This was only the beginning. How far would I have to go to bring the truth to light, and would justice be enough to heal the wounds left behind? Those questions haunted me, but I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't backing down. The plan had to unfold carefully. No impulsive moves, no careless mistakes. Every step needed to be precise, calculated, just like a chess game where I had to think 5 moves ahead of Ryan and his cronies. It began with small actions, quietly gathering more proof, subtly planting questions that made Ryan slip up, and using Ethan's skills to trace emails and documents he thought were buried. One morning, I walked into the office with a new confidence, armed with the first piece of my carefully crafted strategy. Lisa caught my eye at the coffee machine and gave me a discreet thumbs up. "Ready for the big leagues?" she whispered with a smirk. "More than ever," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the storm inside. The first move was to request a meeting with HR. I sent a formal email outlining concerns about potential misconduct, but kept it professional and cautious. I couldn't afford to look like I was making baseless accusations. When the HR manager, Janet, called me in, I could tell she was wary but professional. She asked questions, took notes, and promised discretion. That was when I started dropping hints, subtle but persistent, about the irregularities I'd found. Not enough to blow the case wide open, but enough to get them curious. Ryan, of course, caught wind of it. His smug grin faded the moment I told Janet I was concerned about the fairness of client allocations and sales reporting. "You're making a mistake, Emily," Ryan said later, cornering me in the hallway. "You don't know what you're poking at." I looked up at him calmly. "I know exactly what I'm doing. And I'm not afraid." He scoffed, then tapped his pen that irritating rhythm against the wall. "Just be careful. People who bite the hand that feeds them tend to lose more than they gain." I let the words hang between us, then walked away with a quiet smile. Meanwhile, Ethan was working behind the scenes, hacking through digital layers to uncover more of Ryan's secrets. One afternoon, he slid a folder across my desk. "This," he said quietly, "is everything we need to expose the pattern. Emails, altered reports, even conversations where Ryan admits to playing the game by any means necessary." I glanced through the files, my heart pounding. It was damning. Clear evidence of manipulation, favoritism, and fraud. "You're kidding," Lisa said when I shared the documents during our lunch break. "This is gold. You're going to blow this place wide open." I nodded but warned, "We have to be smart. If we rush, Ryan will cover his tracks." As the days passed, I began planting seeds of doubt with colleagues, those who were beginning to see through Ryan's facade. Maya, who had been hesitant, now quietly handed me notes about suspicious meetings she overheard. Even some of Ryan's closest allies started to question his tactics. One afternoon, I caught Ryan at his desk, visibly rattled. He was frantically deleting files and muttering to himself. "That pen tapping stopped," I joked under my breath, watching him. Later, in a rare moment of vulnerability, Lisa pulled me aside. "You're on his radar now," she warned. "He's going to try everything to discredit you." "I expected nothing less," I said. "Let him try." That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Stop digging or else." I stared at the screen, the threat clear but meaningless. I typed back, "I'm just getting started." The next day brought the first ridiculous accusation. Ryan accused me of leaking confidential company data, a blatant lie. But it was enough to get HR to summon me again. Janet's eyes softened when I arrived. "We've received a complaint," she said carefully. "How do you respond?" I met her gaze steadily, with the truth. I presented the evidence Ethan and I had compiled, including timestamps, email chains, and witness accounts. Janet listened intently, clearly impressed by the thoroughness. "You've done your homework," she said. "This will be investigated thoroughly." Meanwhile, Ryan's behavior grew more erratic. One afternoon, I overheard him ranting to a colleague. "She thinks she's clever," he spat. "I'll crush her." I smiled to myself. Try all you want, Ryan, the game's changed. The tension in the office was palpable. Some coworkers avoided me, fearing fallout, while others watched with quiet hope. Lisa stayed by my side, a fierce ally. "You're making history," she said one day. "No one's ever stood up to him like this." I appreciated her words but kept my focus razor-sharp. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. At the next team meeting, I calmly presented a detailed report highlighting the discrepancies in client assignments and sales figures, backed by the digital trail Ethan uncovered. Ryan's face drained of color as I spoke, his usual arrogance replaced by panic. "How did you get this?" he demanded, voice shaking. I looked him in the eye. "The truth has a way of coming out. You underestimated me." The room fell silent, all eyes on him. That was when Janet stepped forward. "We're initiating a formal audit based on this report," she announced. "Everyone will cooperate fully." Ryan's shoulders slumped, defeated for the first time in months. As I left the room, Lisa caught my arm. "That was brilliant," she whispered. "You really are one step ahead." I nodded, but inside I felt a rush of satisfaction unlike anything before. I wasn't just fighting back, I was winning. Yet even with this victory, a voice in my head whispered, "This is only the beginning. How far will you go to finish what you started?" And I was ready to answer. The day the audit was announced, the atmosphere in the office shifted, like a storm gathering strength. Everyone knew this wasn't just a routine check. It was the beginning of the end for Ryan. I sat quietly at my desk, watching as whispers turned into nervous conversations. Ryan avoided eye contact, and his usual confident swagger was replaced by tension. Later that afternoon, I was called into Janet's office again. She looked serious, but there was a spark of approval in her eyes. "Emily, the auditors found more than we expected," she said, sliding a thick file across the desk. "There's enough evidence to take this beyond internal review." My heart skipped a beat. "Are you saying this is going to legal?" Janet nodded. "We've involved the company's legal team. They're preparing to take formal action." I felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. It was the moment I'd been working toward, but now the stakes were higher than ever. As I left Janet's office, I bumped into Lisa. Her eyes were wide with excitement. "This is it," she whispered. "You did this." Before I could reply, my phone buzzed. A message from Jake: "Keep your head up, they'll try to break you, but you're stronger." I smiled and typed back, "I'm ready." That evening, I met with Ethan at our usual bookstore hideout. He looked grim. "Ryan's lawyers are trying to buy time," he said, flipping through his laptop. "They're scrambling, but they can't deny the facts." I sighed. Good, let's make sure they don't get a chance. The following days were a whirlwind. Legal meetings, depositions, and countless emails flooded my inbox. Every detail had to be perfect. One morning, during a tense conversation with Janet, she warned, "Ryan's not going down without a fight. You might face personal attacks." I met her gaze firmly. "I'm prepared." Ryan's reaction was predictable. At a company meeting, he tried to rally the staff against me. "You don't know the whole story," he said, voice dripping with false sincerity. "Emily's trying to destroy the company for personal gain." Lisa leaned over and whispered, "That's desperate." I decided to respond, not with words but with results. During the legal proceedings, I was called to testify. Standing before a panel of executives and lawyers, I recounted the evidence calmly and clearly. One of the senior lawyers asked, "Did you witness Ryan's interference personally?" I nodded yes multiple times. He manipulated sales data and reallocated clients to sabotage my work. Ryan's face twisted with fury, but I remained composed. After the hearing, Janet pulled me aside. "Your testimony was strong. It made a difference." I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of months of struggle lift slightly. But the battle wasn't over. Ryan's refusal to accept defeat became obvious when he stopped coming to work, and rumors spread of him trying to settle quietly. One afternoon, I overheard a heated conversation between two colleagues. "Did you hear? Ryan's lawyer is pushing for a settlement. He might lose everything." "Good," the other replied. "He deserves it." I felt a quiet satisfaction. This was justice, not just for me, but for everyone Ryan had hurt. That night I sat with Jake, sharing the day's news. "He's finally cornered," I said. Jake smiled. "You took down a giant." I looked out the window, thinking of how far I'd come. From being dismissed as too pretty to fight to standing tall while his empire crumbled. But even now I wondered, was this the end of Ryan's influence? Or just the beginning of a new chapter? Only time would tell. Ryan's collapse was swift and merciless, the kind of downfall that left no room for second chances. I watched it unfold like a slow-motion reckoning, every piece falling apart in ways I hadn't dared to imagine at first. First, the material collapse. News spread like wildfire that Ryan had been removed from his position. His office was cleared out within hours, his desk stripped bare, his nameplate taken down. Rumors swirled of bankruptcy filings and asset seizures. No one dared approach him anymore. The man who once ruled the floor with an iron fist was now a ghost in the hallways. Lisa found me one afternoon, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I saw him today, walking out of the building with a box of his things, looked defeated." I nodded quietly. He brought it on himself. But it wasn't just the loss of job or assets, it was the reputation collapse that stung deeper. Social media caught wind of the scandal, and within days, articles appeared exposing the truth. Headlines screamed about corruption, manipulation, and abuse of power. Former allies distanced themselves quickly, families even turning their backs. One evening, Maya approached me cautiously. I heard his wife filed for divorce. Said she couldn't live with the lies anymore. I felt a strange pang of pity, but I didn't let it show. Justice was a double-edged sword, it cut deep on all sides. Mentally, Ryan was unraveling. I heard from Lisa that he'd become withdrawn, irritable, and lost in a haze of denial. People who once feared him whispered that he was isolated and bitter. It was hard to imagine that the man who used to mock me as just a pretty face was now broken. One day, Lisa and I sat in a quiet corner of our favorite cafe. She sipped her coffee and said softly, "You know, I never thought you'd get here. But you did, you made him pay." I looked out the window, my mind swirling with memories of the battle we'd fought. It wasn't easy, there were moments I wanted to give up. She smiled, "But you didn't, that's the difference." The contrast between Ryan's downfall and my own journey was stark. I wasn't the same person who walked into that office months ago. I'd grown stronger, more confident, and wiser. Jake called me that night. "You should be proud, you turned a nightmare into a victory." I replied, "It's not just about winning. It's about making sure no one else has to go through what I did. That became my new mission. Ryan's story became a cautionary tale, whispered in office corridors as a warning against abuse of power. And while he sank into regret and isolation, I began to rebuild not just my career but my purpose. The office felt different now. The air was lighter, hope replacing fear. I found myself mentoring younger women, encouraging them to speak up, to stand tall. One day, Ethan stopped by my desk with a grin. "You've changed the culture here, you know." I smiled back, feeling a quiet satisfaction. "We did." There was no gloating, no bitterness. Just a deep, steady peace. Because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't tearing someone down, it's rising above and becoming better than they ever expected. And that was exactly what I planned to do. After everything that had happened, the future felt both uncertain and full of promise. The woman who once doubted if she'd ever be taken seriously was now being asked to lead a new initiative, one dedicated to fostering fairness and integrity across the company. It was an unexpected invitation, but I accepted with quiet determination. Lisa was the first to hear the news. We were sitting in our usual cafe, the place where so many plans had been whispered over coffee. "They want you to head the new ethics and inclusion department," she said, eyes shining. "You're literally shaping the future here." I took a deep breath. It feels right, like this is where I was meant to be. The days that followed were a whirlwind of meetings, planning sessions, and heartfelt conversations with colleagues eager to change the culture. I wanted to create a space where no one would ever feel dismissed or silenced because of who they were or how they looked. One afternoon, as I settled into my new office, a simple gift arrived, a framed quote from my mother. "You define yourself by your actions." I smiled, feeling the weight of those words settle over me like a shield. Jake dropped by that week, his grin wide. "You've come full circle, Em, from the underdog to the leader." I laughed softly. It was a long journey, but I couldn't have done it without you all. Helping others became my new mission. I started mentoring young women, sharing my story not as a warning, but as proof that strength and perseverance could break through even the thickest walls. Maya, once hesitant, now worked alongside me in the department. "I never thought I'd see the day," she said one morning. "You changed everything." It wasn't just about the company. It was about the message we sent to everyone watching, that being too pretty or underestimated was no barrier to greatness. One evening, after a long day, I stood by the window overlooking the city skyline. The lights twinkled like stars, each one a story, a life filled with potential. I thought about the battles, the pain, and the victories, and then I smiled quietly to myself, because I knew this was just the beginning. The strength I'd found wasn't just for me, it was for anyone who'd ever been told they weren't enough. And as I turned away from the window, the future felt brighter than ever.